Well, hello everyone and welcome. I just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting me for this talk. And I just wanted to say welcome to all the teachers from all over New Mexico and all over the country. I see a couple of familiar faces, some friends of mine from Virginia, which is welcome. Glad to see you guys were able to not get affected by that big snowstorm in your area. Anyways, let me start. Again, my name is Arthur Lopez. I've been a contemporary, I call myself a contemporary Santero. For those of you that don't know what a Santero is, it's a maker of saints. And in New Mexico, generally, there's a tradition of saint making utilizing the local materials that are found around New Mexico. They're all hand-carved wood. They're gessoed pieces. The gesso is made with a rabbit hide skin that I boil. I boil that and I add marble dust to it to a certain consistency. And I paint it over the piece of wood, and that gives me my base for my pigments. The pigments that I use are a combination of watercolor and natural pigments. Some of the natural pigments that I use is some of the browns. They're black walnut hulls that I find from local trees. I boil the hulls and I extract the brown from them, strain it, and I use that for my browns. Some of the reds that I use are traditional cochineal. Cochineal, if you don't know what it is, it's a female larva. It's from a beetle, a female beetle that grows on cactus. And when it's dried and ground, it creates the vibrant reds in the color that I use. It's been used for centuries for lots of different paintings. El Greco used it. It was done for fabrics. It was dyed by the redcoats, during the Revolutionary War, things like that. So it's a long-standing ingredient in many traditions throughout the world, really. Anyways, after I've done with the painting, then I use now I use a commercial sealer, just because the pieces themselves, I try to use the commercial sealer as a better way of preserving the pieces. Although in the past, I used to use pine sap varnish, which was created with grain alcohol and pine sap from local trees. I stopped using it because pine, of course, the sap tends to yellow over time and crack, and because of what the pieces are now, sold for as artwork and things, I want them to be, preserved as long as possible. I finish them off with a beeswax coat that I put over them just for another type of waterproofing. So that's kind of the story on how Santero work is done. My personal story is, I started doing this 21 years ago. I've been doing this 21 years now professionally. I was a graphic designer formerly, and I was working in Albuquerque doing graphic design, catalog work, things like that. And throughout my life, as I was growing up in high school, in junior high, and in elementary school, all I could think about ever was drawing. Instead of doing my assignments in class, I'd be sketching and drawing in my notebooks and anything that I could do. And throughout high school, all I did was take art classes and did, drawing, sketching, painting, things like that. As I graduated high school, I decided I was going to be a fine artist. So I went to Eastern New Mexico, and I was going to study fine art. And when I was there, I figured, there's no career in art. How am I going to make a living? So I thought, I need to figure something else out. So I went into the graphic design field. It was a relatively new field. It was all done by paste up and taking photos of text and type and, doing that kind of thing at the time. And so I did that for close to 9 years. As I said, I was working in Albuquerque for a catalog company. I got a job offer in Los Angeles. So I moved to Los Angeles, and I was working for Lakeshore Learning. Lakeshore Learning provides some of the largest publications for school books, as a matter of fact, school and learning tools throughout the country. And so I was in their art department, and I was their color guy. I was the guy that made sure all the colors were correct in the catalog. While I was working there, I got a job offer from my former boss from Albuquerque, who was originally from New York, and asked me to head their new catalog. He was moving back to New York, and asked me to be the art director for a new catalog called Macy's by Mail. So I was headed to New York from Los Angeles to New York. I was to stay in Santa Fe to visit with my family for a couple weeks before taking the job in New York. But the day that I got here, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. He had throat cancer. I ended up turning down the job because of his throat cancer. He had an emergency tracheotomy. My mom and dad were recently divorced about a year, so I decided to turn down the job so I could stay and help care for him. During that time, I met my now wife, Bernadette, and my dad ended up passing away about 3 months later. And after he died, I had a refound passion to want to paint and draw again. So, I thought, what do I want to do? I want to paint saints. And so Bernadette and I went to the local Spanish market that was being held that July. It's the last full weekend in July every year. So I thought I'm going to go to Spanish market and learn how to do retablos. Retablos are two-dimensional paintings on wood. And when I was, when we were walking around and I was looking and trying to do as much, learning and research as I could on retablos, I saw the three-dimensional work that are called bultos. And bulto is a three-dimensional carving in wood. And, with a little bit of, some arrogance, I've never done any sculpture carving before. I thought, I think I could do that. So Bernadette and I went up to the local mountains into the Hyde Park area, and I found some downed aspen. And with a hunting knife and a razor blade, I ended up carving my first piece. And for whatever reason, it just came so natural to me that it just, that's all I wanted to do. That's all I could think about. And I started doing all the research that I could. I was going down into the International Folk Art Museum and going down into their archives and studying the bultos that were there, the carvings, getting into the library, trying to learn about the colors, the pigments, the paints. And anyways, so when I started carving my very first piece, I was out on the back porch carving my first painted bulto, and my wife was pregnant at the time with our son, and she went into labor. And I feel like I got two gifts that day. I got my carving career and my son. And I look back at it now, and without my dad passing away, everything happens for a reason. I'm a true believer in that. And had that not happened to my father, as bad as it was at the time, I wouldn't be doing probably what I'm doing now. But that's kind of my long story. And anyways, so what I'm going to do now is lead up into a video that I made about the altar that we're talking about. It's called 2020 Altar Vision. And I'm going to go ahead and start the video, and we'll look at that, and then I will go into some slides. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the slideshow, and I'll kind of talk about the piece with the slideshow as well as some of the other pieces. Okay, so the piece that you just watched the video on, Alter Vision 2020. Of course, we're all going through this crazy pandemic together, and we're all, you know, experiencing a lot of things that we've never done before, as well as like this Zoom meeting that we're having now. And this piece was inspired by everything that's been going on. So it all started back in March, when we first had our main lockdown here in New Mexico, and everybody went crazy around the country, selling out of toilet paper everywhere. I was just kind of inspired, I don't know if inspired or what you would call it, but taken by everything that was going on. And you're seeing how, you'd go to a store, toilet paper was flying off the shelves if you could even, and sometimes you couldn't even find it. And so later on, you'll see the first piece that I did in kind of a series of different COVID and related, pandemic kind of pieces. And it was a roll of toilet paper with holy rays behind it. And it was called, I titled it Sagrada Papel, which is the holy paper or the sacred paper. And kind of that was what kind of started this whole like series of alter COVID pieces and pandemic pieces. So I'm just going to kind of go over a little bit of the altar here as we're going. I don't know if you could see my cursor on the screen, but what it has here is with a traditional altar, generally an altar is dedicated to a certain saint. Up at the top in the corona up here, which is, the rays that are on the top is Saint Corona. And corona also means crown. So with this one here, Saint Corona, I made her kind of as a nurse or emergency, kind of person that's been so helpful during all these times. On the top, she has the coronavirus as a crown instead of her normal crown, as her altar. And the altar is kind of made in that sense of a sanitation altar. So you're inside of your house and it gives you the view of the inside looking out. And so inside of your house is everything that you're seeing. Outside, you see the coronavirus just everywhere floating around as you look out the window. Washing our hands is a big thing. So you have your sink as your main piece here where you're washing your hands. You got your soap, your Purell to sanitize your hands. And then another thing that was kind of interesting that happened at the beginning of the pandemic also was people stopped buying Corona beer because of the association with the coronavirus, which is kind of, ridiculous really. But anyways, so that's why the Corona beer is here, is it's kind of that ode to what was going on there. Of course, then what happened is all of our Zoom meetings and social happy hours. So here on the bottom, you have San Saragossa happy hour. San Saragossa is the patron saint of wine and wine drinkers. And so he's doing an online chat with an online, virtual happy hour. The retablos that are on the side are two patrons saints of pandemics. Saint Roque here on the left, he is the patron saint of pandemics. The story goes that he was a saint who dedicated his life to helping people that had been stricken by the plague. And he would go and he'd heal them. And while healing them, he contracted the plague himself and decided to go in isolation so that he could stay away and not infect anyone else, which is also similar to what people are doing here, doing isolation and things like that. While in isolation and he was dealing with his sores, he figured he'd just go off and die. Well, this dog just showed up miraculously and started bringing him bread and things to eat, and then would lick his wounds, and his wounds were miraculously healed. So, which is one of the stories of why he is the patron saint of the plague or pandemics. On the right side is a female saint. It's Saint Catherine of Siena. She is also another patron saint of the plague, but also of nurses. Her story is she was born during an outbreak of the plague. And she dedicated her life also to service, but for caring for the poor and sick. And she would visit many hospitals and care for people that were injured and sick. And that's one of the reasons why she is patron saint of nurses. So that's kind of the general story of this whole altar, but I'll just kind of move through it as we go. And again, if anybody has any questions as I'm talking, I guess it's hard to see anyone raising their hand, but maybe they can send a message or something, and I could try to answer it that way. So included in it is kind of the process that goes through. So early in the video, you saw that I was laminating pieces of wood together, so you could see here that it is all wood. It's all laminated and joined together, glued in between each joint. There's just another kind of process piece of this while I was sanding. You could still see some of the sand and things like that as I was carving and fine sanding the sink that was going to go with it. Parts of the Corona bottle, the lid, like that. And then at the top we have Saint Corona. And again, like I was saying, here is her with her PPE, all of her protection gear on, her nitrile gloves, she's got her mask on, and of course the coronavirus as her crown. A shot of the window. Some of the reds that I was referring to, some of the darker and deeper reds, is some of that cochineal that goes inside of it. Let me back up real quick. And you can't really see too well, but the brown here in her hair is some of that black walnut hulls that I was talking about for the browns and things like that.
Arthur, there's a question in the chat from Jansen from Mandela International Magnet School. She asks, how big is the entire piece? It's difficult to tell. So the altar.
I don't have the measurements in front of me, but it's probably about, would you say, Nicholas, about 3 feet wide by about 4 or 5 feet high?
Yeah, I'd say it's about that. I could try to look up the exact measurements and get back.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but it's about 3 feet by 4 feet.
Roughly what it is.
This is a kind of a close-up detail of the one of the coronaviruses in the window. You could see inside of here, you could see the background, you could see some of the cracks and things like that. That's a normal process because of the moisture in the wood that escapes as the gesso, starts to cure to it. There's a close-up of Saint Catherine of Siena, retablo, and again, it has some of the cochineal inside of there. There's any brown. There's San Roque, the dog that brought him bread and licked his wounds to heal the plague that he had. Close up of the sink. So this piece here, actually, not all of the colors are water-based colors. This chrome obviously isn't a water-based piece. It's a new color that I found that's called liquid chrome, and I thought it would be perfect for this. Normally I silver leaf or gold leaf pieces, but I decided to try out that new new paint for that. Close up of the Corona bottle. And again, San Vicente Zaragoza, the patron saint of wine drinkers. And just another part of it. So right here's the piece I was talking about, the La Sagrada Papel, that kind of started. This was the first piece I did during the pandemic because of the shortage of toilet paper that had started during the beginning of the pandemic. This is another Saint Corona piece that I did during the pandemic. It's just Saint Corona herself. She has, of course, the syringes going into it in anticipation. This was before the vaccine had come out, but during the, in anticipation of that. Another piece that I did during it is St. Peter or San Pedro, Faith Time. And I did a series of different laptops as well as cell phones. Of course, because of during the pandemic, again, Zoom meetings. Saint Peter is known as the patron saint of heaven. He's the keeper of the keys. He's the guy that lets you in. One of his symbols of iconography is the rooster, because one of the stories is that he would deny Christ 3 times before, during the crucifixion, leading up to that, during the Passion. And so here you have the photobombing rooster, as we've seen in many different Zoom meetings and things like that, where kids run by or something, the dog comes over, or something happens. So here we have a photobombing rooster with St. Peter. He's holding his keys, and then again he's got the keys on top of the laptop, and he's got the ring of it's barbed wire as his key ring, in representation to the crown of thorns, I guess. Here are a couple more pieces. Cell phones. This one is Faith Time San Jose and a Faith Time Santo Niño. San Jose, or Saint Joseph, is Jesus's stepfather. Then we have Jesus himself in there, and so they're kind of all just holding up their cell phones and doing their own selfies and Zoom talks. This is moving on to more just different examples of my work. This is just to give you an example that I don't just do pandemic relief pieces, but this is, I like to have fun with my work and keep it more contemporary. And this is St. Peter, Paul, and Mary. And so it has them more in that, 60s love style VW bug. And it's got St. Peter, St. Paul, and Mary Magdalene. Along with their iconography, of course, St. Peter with his keys, St. Paul is holding a book in his lap that you can't see, and then Mary Magdalene holds a jar of ointment and some flowers because she anointed Jesus's feet during the resurrection, or after the resurrection. And moving on, Mariachi Loco. I've done several of the mariachi pieces, kind of Dia de los Muertos or Day of the Dead inspired pieces. So here again, just a mariachi style piece, all of them wood. Some more, you can see some of the black walnut brown in the guitar handle here, or neck, a little bit better. This is my Gio Madre Lupe. I like doing a lot of different style pieces just to kind of inspire me. So this was, that geometric design. I've done several kind of Picasso inspired pieces. And this was kind of still in that realm of them, where playing with different shapes and figures and styles, I guess. Again, here is some of the cochineal, the browns, the yellows are yellow ochres, which is a mineral, and then some of the silver leaf that I do on top of that. This is La Ascension de María, or the Ascension of Mary. The story of the Ascension is when Mary has died, she is lifted up into heaven. My contemporary style is, it's got Jesus's hand, so that's why you have the wound, the barbed wire, again, representation of the crown of thorns. And here it's a mylar style balloon with Mary on it, and the cord is cut because she's raising up into heaven, like releasing a balloon. The hand is the hand of Jesus, like I said, with the stigmata coming out, with the crown of thorns going through it, or the rope. On his knuckles, it has Dios for Father, Mother, Madre on his heart, on the Sacred Heart over here, or the Heart of Mary. And then on the opposite side, there's also another tattoo with the eye of God on that. Let's see. Another kind of contemporary Saint Sebastian martyrs is Saint Sebastian's story is he was martyred by being shot with arrows. And so here we have Saint Sebastian. He's on top of, more of a more modern kind of pedestal with the graffiti art on it. He's got his tattoos, Lord have mercy, and was shot in the heart, which has Mi Corazon as a tattoo being shot through that, with the martyr. On the back, which I don't have the backside photo of it, has a homeless man on the back side of it, a homeless veteran, because he's also patron saint of soldiers and things like that. So it has a homeless veteran on the side who was you know, the veterans are martyred for what they had been through, kind of thing, with the homelessness. This is a piece of titled "Me, Myself, and I," Me, Myselfie, and I. This is a piece, the only self-portrait that I've done. This piece was made for a competition at the Smithsonian's Portrait Gallery. Every 3 years, the Portrait Gallery in Washington holds a competition, and I made this piece for that competition. And it was selected as a semi-finalist. So the piece made it, you know, out of thousands of entries around the country, they pick 100 as semi-finalists, and then they narrow it down to 50. So I made it as the top 100, but just didn't make it for the final 50. But that was my self-portrait for that competition. And again, it has, you know, the Fear No Art, which is from the Chicago Museum of Art. And then, of course, all my tattoos and things like that, carving myself out, and a selfie. And that's all for those. And let's see, stop share. So kind of that's a general idea of me, my work, and the pieces that I've done during this pandemic, and during, you know, this whole time of Corona.